I want to ask you, first of all, about this somewhat extraordinary government apology for missing the warnings, the threats of a possible terror attack. How do you think that could have happened, that miscommunication was so bad that these things just wouldn't have been followed up?
I think I must say that if there have been any intelligence lapses, the government will be looking at it. So that's all I can say for the moment, because hardly 24 hours have lapsed, since the incident has happened. So it's too early to talk about anything on that effect.
And yet we have had an apology, though, from the government, which does suggest some responsibility, at least, for these attacks taking place.
That's why I said, government will look at it and then they will come up with something that will, be, explaining the situation, what you just wanted to clarify.
There has been a suggestion that it could perhaps be a local Islamist extremist group, but also a further suggestion that such a group would not have been capable of coordinating such an attack as this without some sort of support from an international network. What is your understanding of the potential perpetrators and of their wider links on a global scale?
In fact, the initial reports point at localized groups for the carnage that has occurred, but then we now have some sort of intelligence to say that there have been international linkages to the terrorist group that has taken part in these atrocities.
Can you be more specific as to...
Now, again, I must tell you that, it is too early, because investigations are being conducted, and, it is too early for me to, speculate on anything right now.
We also understand that, as you say, it's very early on in the investigation, and we know that Sri Lankan authorities have sought international advice and help as well. The FBI, for example, are there helping with the ongoing investigation. As far as Sri Lankans and foreigners in the country right now are concerned, there have been curfews in place, the state of emergency is just about to go into effect. Should the people there trust this government to be able to manage the fallout from such an attack?
If you ask me, over the last 10 years, since the end of the conflict, there have been no, violence whatsoever over the last 10 years. So this is something that has taken place all of a sudden, and, given the scale and magnitude of the attacks that have taken place, which bear all the hallmarks of a very well coordinated terrorist attack, the government has done a tremendous job.
Yeah, the country obviously is still in a period of shock and deep, deep mourning, as is the rest of the world, for Sri Lanka as well. Sarath Dissanayake, many thanks for your time, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, our Will Ripley is also following developments for us on the ground in Sri Lanka. He's in Colombo. He joins me with the very latest now. Will, just bring us up to speed with not just the attacks that have already taken place, but the fear now of reprisal attacks, of more explosives that have been found.
Yeah, absolutely, Hannah. There is a significant fear that they haven't found everything and everyone yet.
Or was it not premature for President Trump to say that ISIS is defeated? Because, yes, maybe on the battlefield, but certainly not in terms of ideology and the tentacles that it has spread wide and far.
Well, I wouldn't give short shrift to the president's accomplishment on ISIS. It is not a distant memory to recall the beheadings on beaches, people being burned alive in cages.
Essentially, it means that Donald Trump has ended the waivers for countries importing Iranian oil. Why is that happening now? And is this as much about punishing those states such as India, China, South Korea, Japan, Turkey, as well as it is about punishing Iran?
It is not about punishing any of those countries that you named. Iran, its largest source of revenue, the regime's largest source of revenue, is oil imports. They then take that revenue and they use it to spend billions of dollars supporting President Assad's civil war, supporting Hezbollah and their attacks on Israel, supporting Shia militias in Iraq, supporting the Houthis in Yemen that have contributed so much to the humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen. If we are going to deny Iran the ability to fund these proxy wars throughout the Middle East, we have to go after their oil revenue.
But the fact that Iran is going to be essentially cut off means that someone else has to fill the void. Now, we've already heard, and I think we can bring up the tweet from the president saying that Saudi Arabia and others will fill the void left by Iran as far as oil is concerned. Is it appropriate, though, for the United States to be reliant on Saudi Arabia to fuel its country?
It's not just Saudi Arabia. It is important that Saudi Arabia do what it can to offset the loss of Iranian barrels of crude oil on the global market.
Sam, one wonders what this terror atrocity means for how people on the outside world view Sri Lanka and how Sri Lankans view their own country as well.
Well, Hannah, I think from the outside perspective, and this is part of the intent clearly for whatever terrorist group was behind this series of clearly well-planned atrocities, is an attempt to undermine one of the bedrocks of Sri Lanka's economy, and that is the tourist industry.
Let's get the perspective then of a local Sri Lankan journalist. Joining us now via Skype is Easwaran Rutnam, the editor of the Colombo Gazette and a correspondent for Asia Pacific Daily. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope the connection's clear enough for you. I want to ask you first of all about the mood amongst the people in Sri Lanka. Do they have fear of more attacks? And is there a sense of nervousness about whether the government, whether the authorities have a grip on this situation going forward?
Well, the sense of or the mood in Sri Lanka right now is both sadness and a lot of anger as well.
Could you just explain for us, Easwaran, what the political balance of power is currently in Sri Lanka? Is it still based on a sectarian split along the same lines of the Civil War?
Well, the political power is based on a singles majority-led government. There have been concerns that at least the former government was seen as being favored by the singles majority. This government came into power with the support of the minorities. The Muslims and Christians especially supported this government because the former regime led by former President Mahinda Rajapaksa was not favored by the Muslims, especially after there were certain incidents where Buddhist extremists attacked Muslims and Muslim places of worship and Muslim establishments.
Yeah, no evidence, as you say, as yet, or claim of culpability. However, we do know that there were warnings. Some of them, those warnings came from the United States, that such a terror attack could be possible in Sri Lanka. And the government there has already apologized for missing those warnings, for not acting. How is it possible that a government doesn't act on such a threat?
And I'm speculating here, I'm theorizing here, but I think a lot of what we know about Sri Lanka in the local context is that there's been kind of a history of anti-Muslim violence. There's been a history of mosques being destroyed and businesses being burned over the last couple of years. And I think that broader context sets the stage for how intelligence is received.
One big legal battle is shaping up in Washington over what President Donald Trump once called his red line. He and his Trump organization have filed a lawsuit to try to block a Democratic-chaired House committee from obtaining his financial records. Let's get right to Sunlan Safati on Capitol Hill for all the details. And Sunlan, is it unprecedented or, at the very least, unusual for one branch of government to sue another?
It absolutely is, Hannah, and this really does signify an escalation in the ongoing battle between President Trump and House Democrats in this fight over information.
Ways to stop that are as easy as apparently planting a bee-friendly garden or keeping pot plants. I don't currently keep bees, but I do keep pot plants, so maybe I'm doing my bit. Thanks so much for watching tonight. Stay with us here at CNN. Quest Means Business is coming up next.